Welcome to episode 28 of the Ask the Law Firm Seller Show. My name is Jeremy Poock, and I lead Senior Attorney Match. Today's Ask show will include three segments. Our first segment will be a Q&A relating to the purchases and sales of law firms. Our second segment, we're excited to introduce a guest today, Tim Mackey from the Vista Consulting team. Tim will address three tips for plaintiff contingency firms to consider as they're considering selling a plaintiff contingency law firm. And then our third segment is our Poock's Post. And just to tee up our Poock's Post today, we'll address thoughts about law firm sales as we're heading towards 2030. So let's jump right into it with our first question today. So our first question today is, what are several top mistakes to avoid before selling a law firm? Great, thank you. So there are 5 top mistakes to avoid before selling a law firm. The first mistake to avoid is to wait too long to sell your law firm. We are now in the mid-2020s. Senior attorneys, that is, attorneys that have practiced for more than 30 years, we really caution not to wait too long to sell your law firm, primarily because digital disruption has finally arrived to the legal industry. It arrived to other industries. We can think of Amazon to Sears, Uber to taxi cab medallions, Netflix to Blockbuster. Well, in 2020, when we were all at home for those months, and we all, of course, wish that COVID had never happened, but during that time, society pivoted big time digitally, and that also finally meant that clients for law firms pivoted digitally as well, and have begun and will continue to search for lawyers and law firms online. What we're seeing primarily among senior attorney-led firms who pre-2020, pre-Google, relied upon word of mouth for word of mouth referrals to lawyers at their law firms. Well, today, would-be clients are going to Google, they're going to AI, they're going to other social media type platforms to look for attorneys and law firms to hire. As a result, their all-important books of business are not replenishing as quickly and as well as yesteryear. And if your book of business does not replenish as well as yesteryear, then the value of your practice will decrease. As a result, that first mistake to avoid is to not wait too long while your book of business is filled with clients and referral sources. That is the right time to consider selling your law practice. Next, in terms of a mistake to avoid before selling a law firm, is to assume that your internal successors want to purchase your practice. We see this all too often. That is, senior attorneys assume that their key employee lawyers will walk down the hall one day and say, you know what, I want to be partner here. I want to succeed to ownership here. Here's the reality that we continue to see, though, is that key employee lawyers, what do they really want? What they really want is a reliable, predictable, and safe job. You, as the owner of the law firm, you hired key employee lawyers at one point, probably because as the owner of the firm, you're a rainmaker. You needed talented attorneys to do the work that you were generating. And those talented lawyers that you hired then, they wanted a job then, and they still want a job now. So it is a huge mistake to be able to avoid when senior attorney sellers of law firms recognize that their would-be internal successors were then, are now key employees who only want a reliable, predictable, and safe job, and they do not want to purchase a small business law firm. The third mistake to avoid before selling a law firm is to underestimate Google and artificial intelligence, AI, for post-2020 business development. It's just a fact. We all go to Google to search today. And more, since the introduction of ChatGPT only in late November of 2022, and multiple other forms of AI search vehicles, we continue to rely on those search vehicles to give us advice about, let's say, best attorney for fill in the blank need near me, or to ask ChatGPT, which is becoming more and more. And here I'll share a phrase that Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V uses, thinking about AI as one's thought partner, right? We're relying on our thought partner, ChatGPT, to say, hey, I have these legal issues. Who is the best attorney, or who would you recommend as the right law firms for me to consider for these particular issues? What does that really mean for selling law firms who previously relied upon people referring business to them? Well, if the consumer, that is the would-be client, is bypassing asking their prior authorities for who they rely upon for making referrals, their accountant, their financial planner, their parent, their brother, their sister, their gym buddy, and whatnot, and they're going straight to Google or to AI to be asking for the recommendation and the social proof for who's the right lawyer or law firm to hire, well, that means that senior attorneys are just not getting as much business if they're not on that playing field, if they're not getting recommended by Google, by ChatGPT, and other forms of artificial intelligence. Then if you're not being found, you're not being hired. If you're not being hired, you're not going to have as strong of a book of business to sell to a would-be buyer of your law firm. The next mistake to avoid when it comes to considering selling your law firm is overlooking the opportunities to convert your subject matter knowledge to digital content. So as we've been saying, clients today, post 2020, they are looking for lawyers online. They are looking for lawyers via multiple channels of social media. They are expecting their AI companion to be recommending best attorneys for them to consider. Well, what is it that senior attorneys in particular have, as well as the attorneys at their law firms? They have subject matter knowledge that Google and AI want, the proverbial algorithms, right? They rely upon content. What is it that senior attorneys have developed over the course of their careers in multiple practice areas? Is subject matter knowledge. So there is a great opportunity today for senior attorneys to convert their subject matter knowledge to LinkedIn posts, to constant contact e-newsletters, to Instagram posts, to YouTube videos, to podcasts, webinars, even TikTok videos, blogs, right? A tremendous amount of opportunity out there. Maybe you won't do it, right? And you won't adopt this opportunity, but for sure, a purchasing law firm, they recognize and need those literal treasure chests of subject matter knowledge that senior attorneys have that can be converted into digital content to attract the attention of would-be clients. And then the fifth mistake to avoid before selling a law firm is to assume that if today is like yesterday, then tomorrow is going to continue to be like today. And what we see, unfortunately, is two forms of Random Tuesday events. First form of a Random Tuesday event is when your key employee lawyer or your key paralegal leaves, only with 2 or 4 weeks notice typically. These are people that have been with you for years, sometimes for decades. What is it that they really want, though? They want and need a reliable, predictable, and safe job. And when they see that their senior attorney employer just turned 68, just turned 72, just turned 75, or turn back the clock a little, maybe turn 58, at some point, if a key employee of yours, whether it's a lawyer or a parastaff, if they don't think that their job maintains reliability, predictability, and safety, despite the fact that you've been carrying these people, paying their wages, taking care of them vacation-wise, paying for their health insurance for years and even decades, they will leave on a Random Tuesday. And when they leave on a Random Tuesday, and let's focus on the lawyers in particular, when a key lawyer leaves, key lawyer could leave with clients. More importantly, or just as important, is the vacuum that's created about who's going to do the sophisticated work that a key employee that you relied upon for doing that work, because it is hard in today's marketplace, and it will continue to be hard to replace sophisticated attorneys to join a senior attorney-led firm, not only because we need to find someone that knows the practice area, but because those replacements, they also want a reliable, predictable, and safe job. And when you are a 70-year-old senior attorney trying to replace a 55-year-old attorney who was cranking out 1,000 to 1,500 billable hours a year, it is difficult. And when they leave with clients or just leave generally, it also makes the law practice less valuable, because what is it that purchasers of law firms want and need? They want and need not only your book of business, but they also need your talented staff, because they're going to need talented lawyers and parastaff to also do the work for your clients as well as for their clients. And we have seen deals happen where even when a senior attorney-led firm has a great book of business, if you don't have attorneys and parastaff to do the work, many law firms will say, well, I'm sorry, we're maxed out. We don't have enough people here to continue servicing the work. The additional Random Tuesday event, very unfortunate, is when a owner of a law firm predeceases or suffers some form of a disability that prevents them from continuing to practice law. And in those instances, unfortunately, the value of the practice just plummets, because the key to law firm sales that we continue to see is what we call trust transfer. The clients need to transfer to a purchasing firm, and that happens where the senior attorney, rainmaker attorney, transfers the trust of his or her clients to the lawyers at a purchasing firm. And if a lawyer is not available, unfortunately, because of a Random Tuesday event where the lawyer predeceases or becomes disabled, the ability to sell that law firm by a surviving spouse or loved one becomes very difficult, and also without the trust transfer, the value of the practice just plummets. Okay, so for our second question today, our second question is, I enjoy practicing law, but I am tired of managing the office. What options do I have? So thank you for that question. And just to share, like, this is a concept, a complaint, an observation that we hear very often from senior attorneys, which is that I'm just tired of managing the office. We ask our clients, one of our first questions is, okay, if we had a magic wand, what is it that you would no longer want to do? One would think in some respects, because these are people that are considering selling their firms, that say, I just no longer want to practice anymore. No, that's not it. What we hear is they're just tired of managing the practice. They want to continue practicing. They love working with clients, or love doing business development, or love doing the legal writing, or being in court. But what they really can't stand, and what makes them really tired, is the fact that they've got to deal with fixing the copy machine, negotiating rent for the new lease, hiring another legal assistant, heck, making payroll on the second Friday of every month, and of course, writing a check to the landlord. Second frustration that we hear when senior attorneys are asking for options when they're tired is a frustration of, well, I've got these key employee lawyers, right? And like, I'm just so frustrated that they don't see the opportunity with purchasing my law firm. So here, when it comes to the frustration on the key employee lawyers, what we're explaining to our clients is that in reality, your key employee lawyers, you have a right to be frustrated with them. But in reality, what is it that they really want? They want a reliable, predictable, and safe job. They really don't want to purchase your law firm. So we recognize that you're tired. We also recognize that you're frustrated that your key employee lawyers don't want to purchase your practice. So then question is, what are your options? And when it comes to the options, for senior attorneys who are tired of running their own practices, we see that there's, and explain to our clients, there's really three options that you have. The preferred option is to join a growing law firm, because what we find is that a growing law firm, they want and need what senior attorney-led firms have. They're often running and what is it they have? They have clients, referral sources, key employees that can produce sophisticated legal work. And often growing law firms are run like businesses. There's often an office manager or a man or a managing attorney that wants to and has the ability to run the office. And if we could just go back for a moment, just to go back to those other options that that senior attorneys have. The next option after the growing law firm that wants and needs to purchase a senior attorney-led firm is the potential option is, okay, could you sell your practice to an internal successor? Is your key employee lawyer or lawyers at your firm, do they actually want to purchase your practice? We find for the most part that no, they don't. They want a reliable, predictable, and safe job instead. And then the third option is to just maintain your status quo. That is, if you're tired of running your office, maybe you could do it for another year, maybe you could do it for another 2 years. But by maintaining that status quo, that level of just being exhausted and tired of running the office is only going to continue. And by the way, here's something that we see often with our senior attorney clients is that because they're in what we call the MVP years of their careers between ages 55 and 75, we're finding that attorneys are attracting the most number of clients that they ever have in the course of their careers. They're closing on new business because they know the law, right? They have the experience, they have the reputation. So if you're tired and maintain the status quo, sometimes what we see is that you're only become more exhausted because you're going to be generating even more work. So now let's look at the growing law firm option, right? That is when senior attorneys are expressing that they're tired of running their offices, what are their options? The primary option that we suggest and that we see in the marketplace is to join, sell to, merge with a growing law firm because growing law firms want and need three resources that senior attorney led firms bring to the proverbial table. They bring with them their book of business, which presents instant client growth to a growing law firm. Secondly, is you're bringing an experienced workforce. Those same key employee lawyers whom senior attorneys are often frustrated with that they don't want to purchase their firm, they are a proverbial godsend to a growing law firm. That is, growing law firms want and need talented lawyers, talented parastaff. Check both of those boxes that senior attorneys bring with them when they join, sell to, or merge with a growing law firm. And then the third resource that the attorneys at senior attorney-led firms bring with them when they are selling to a growing law firm is subject matter knowledge in multiple practice areas that can be converted into digital content that growing law firms need today to attract the attention of would-be clients who are looking online for digital content to learn about growing firms for them to hire for their legal needs. So now let's look at when senior attorneys, when they start out as tired, what we are seeing is that by joining a growing law firm, what we are seeing is that those senior attorneys have the ability to move from being tired to inspired to then retired. So what do we mean by that? Is that when we're hearing from senior attorneys that they're just tired of managing their offices, and we explain that growing law firms want and need what they have, they want and need their clients, they want and need their talented lawyer and parastaff, and their subject matter knowledge to convert to digital content. Our clients, when they join a growing law firm, they become inspired because they're often not retiring at that point. They're continuing to practice. They're choosing what areas of law they want to focus on. They get to choose which clients they want to work with, right? I mean, even as I'm saying this, I can sort of feel that sense of relief that our clients have when they join growing law firms and can choose what it is that they want to work on as compared to having to manage the office, no longer having to deal with ADP, no longer having to write checks to a landlord, no longer having to deal with the fact that Sally or John didn't show up the night before, the day of the deposition for, some big matter. Of course, that's a headache that they still have to deal with, but maybe there's another paralegal who would do it, and that you, as the owner of the firm, no longer have to deal with those issues. And then, very importantly, in this inspired category, is being able to benefit by what we call a deep bench of lawyers and para staff that you can rely upon, that you can start transferring the trust of your clients to lawyers at a firm that senior attorneys join. That's the inspired part of joining a growing law firm. And then there's the retired part, right? Now that you have sold your law firm, you've joined or merged your firm with a growing law firm that can capably represent your clients. The retired part consists of really two categories. One is the fact that you can leave a legacy, right? You were so tired before running your office. By selling your firm, you're leaving a legacy. Your clients are in good hands with capable lawyers who can continue to zealously and competently represent your clients. You've taken care of your staff. Almost all growing law firms today, we continue to see it, they want and need your lawyers and para staff, the people you care about. You know that you're taking care of their families when you're paying their paychecks. Well, when they all join, the entire team joins a growing law firm. It is part of the senior attorney seller's legacy that those key employee lawyers and para staff continue to have jobs. You're sharing your knowledge, right? Who doesn't love to share a career's worth of knowledge with people who can benefit by it? Not just the clients, but your new colleagues at the firms that you join. And then for those lawyers that enjoy marketing, and many do, you're able to convert your subject matter knowledge into digital content. You're able to go onto podcasts, make YouTube videos, write e-newsletters. Again, for those that enjoy sharing that subject matter knowledge, you can convert it into digital content as part of your legacy. And then that second category is to actually retire. Spend more time with your family, with your friends. Pursue, other pursuits outside of the law. There is a life outside of the office. And when you're actually able to semi-retire and retire, you're able to proverbially smell those roses. And then finally, sometimes for those lawyers that are not ready to sell their firm and join a growing law firm, but you are tired, there is another option there, which is to start referring matters to other lawyers. If you're not going to join another firm, it is okay to refer matters to lawyer colleagues of yours and actually identify one or more firms and enter into fee sharing arrangements with them. So that is, before you retire, before you sell, you can reduce the exhaustion. You can reduce being tired by referring matters out to colleagues of yours in consideration for referral fees per Rule 1.5 of the professional rules of conduct that apply in a given lawyer's state. Okay, so for today's second segment, very excited to welcome a guest, Tim Mackey. Tim is the CEO of Vista Consulting Team based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Tim, you'll share more with us in a second, but it's been great to get to know you. We both share a similar passion with working with plaintiff contingency firms, and Tim's going to share knowledge with us today about tips as plaintiff contingency firms are considering selling their law practices. So Tim, welcome, and love to hear some background about you and Vista.
Yeah, well, look, thank you so much. I'm honored to be on the podcast today, and been really fun getting to know you and our mutual shared interests. So it's been a lot of fun there. Vista Consulting is 15 years old. We're a operational and consulting and a strategic consulting firm. We help our clients systematize their business. And it's interesting, some of the things you said earlier, Jeremy, play right into what we do. We call ourselves, and our tagline is the business resource for plaintiff law firms. We don't get involved in cases. We get involved in the business of running a law firm. And there are certain things that you learn in law school about how to practice law, but what they don't teach you a lot of times is how to run a business that practices law. And that's kind of Vista's bread and butter. I'm a CPA. I'm not a lawyer. I've been working in the law firm space for, as I said, about 15 years. We've been lucky enough to get behind the green curtain of close to 300 plaintiff law firms across the country over that time, observing their practices and creating our list of best practices and systems and processes. So I really appreciate you inviting me here, and I'm happy to share some tips.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So let's go right into it. Right, there's a lot of buzz in the plaintiff contingency field about selling their law firms. So just love to hear from you, Tim, some tips for strategic planning to sell a plaintiff contingency law firm.
Sure. And in our conversations leading up to this, we said we were going to talk about three. It was very hard for me to narrow down three, but I'm going to do so. What I'm going to do is kind of hit those three and then come back and give some details of each one. You know, the best thing you can do to prepare your firm to be sellable is to be profitable. You know, that's not rocket science, but it's to be profitable and to know your numbers. And I'll come back and talk about what those numbers are in detail. The second tip is simply to know the ballpark value of your firm, and to know that by going through a methodology of valuing your firm, not just, hey, I want to get this much for my firm, or I feel that my firm is worth this, because there are methodologies of valuation, and it can vary a good bit with a lot of variables, but you should have that idea of what that range is in your mind when you're starting to get into the market, to know really what is reasonable in your case. So again, be profitable, know your numbers, know your valuation, and know the methodology and what buyers are usually looking for. So the third thing is to have very efficient and effective operations within your firm that are documented. Because what you want to do is to be able to look at your firm and say, can it operate without me? And Jeremy referred to that a little bit earlier. If it can operate without you and it is systematically sound, that's good. Your firm is more valuable because the buyer doesn't have to come in and reinvent any wheels. You've already got the systems and processes in place. Vista, on top of those systems and processes, we're very insistent that we overlay those with an accountability system. In other words, you can tell your team, hey, we want you to be, oh, look, here's the best practices in whatever the area you're in. But to hold them accountable to that is another matter altogether. And there are reporting mechanisms and things like that. Again, we don't want to use those as a hammer. We want to use them as coaching tools, but there are systems that are out there that can help hold your team accountable. So let me jump back up to the top quickly and tell you some of the numbers that you need to know if you are a profitable firm that will help you communicate to a potential buyer. You need to know what your gross revenues are. You should know that. You need to know your net revenues, okay? Gross versus net. You need to know the EBITDA that your firm produces. EBITDA is a term of art. It just means earnings before income taxes, depreciation, and amortization. You need to know your average case fee, okay? Cases and the average that you get from each case. You need to know your case acquisition costs. How much does it cost you to get a case in your door? You need to know the number of cases under your roof and the estimated value. That's not something you need to know every day, but if you're looking to sell, you should know that. And then you should also know the average time on desk. How long does it take you to get a case through your firm on average? And we can talk about that, breaking it down between pre-litigation and litigation. We can get into a tremendous number of details, but again, knowing your numbers, being profitable. You know, I was working with a client, and by the way, I'm in the process right now of consulting with some clients that are attempting to sell. And one of them said, hey, you know, I've got this really great brand. It's really good. You know, people know me, blah, blah, blah. But the firm wasn't very profitable. So you can have great brands, you can have name recognition, but if your firm is not producing, then you still have a problem, and you're going to have a problem when you're getting ready to sell. So, but then knowing the value, number two, there's a methodology that we like to use. I actually did a webinar on that myself. If you'd like to get a copy of that webinar, just simply email me and I'll make sure you get a copy of that goes through evaluation methodology. And again, it's kind of high level, but at the same time, it puts you in the ballpark of your value. And then again, the efficiency and effectiveness of your operation, extremely important. And having a game plan or a methodology or reports that can hold your team accountable to best practices will put you in great stead to get the highest value from your firm.
Tim, that was great. Thank you so much. And at the end, yeah, please, you'll share your email address with us. So if people want to get a copy of that report, of that webinar, that would be terrific. So let's shift a little bit, right? Because we talked before about the buzz in the industry, about private equity coming in to the plaintiff contingency space. Let's toss around between us a bit of like, what does a buyer want and need when it comes to purchasing a plaintiff contingency practice? What are you seeing?
I would say, and again, we've got to be very general because every situation, every transaction is a little bit different. But if it's a what I call a strategic buyer, someone who's looking to buy several firms and possibly combine them and do some type of roll up, that's a strategic buyer. If it's what I call a mom and pop buyer, and that's not derogatory at all, it's just a firm that wants to buy the firm and run it themselves. And what either of those want really is very similar. They want a good return on their investment. So the question is, how confident then can they get in the profitability and cash flow of their target company? And then how much are they willing to invest to acquire that profitability? And what type of return are they looking for? Generally, the strategic buyers may be a little bit less because they're looking to roll up. If there's a mom and pop buyer, they're going to want to get a good return on their investment because it's extremely risky to buy not just a law firm, but an ongoing business. There's lots of things they could invest in that are not quite as risky. So if you look at risk and return, the return needs to be healthy.
Right. And I'll tell you what I'm seeing is a comparison to what's happened in the dental field and in the accounting field. But I'll focus here more on dentists, which is let the buyers come in and help to manage the business. Okay. I mean, lawyers, like you said before, we didn't go to law school to run businesses. We went to law school to advocate for clients, to love and enjoy the practice of law. And when private equity can come in and assist with the management of the running of business, how can the teams run more efficiently? How can we leverage AI better? How can we outsource people to other countries, other jurisdictions? How can we make an impact with digital marketing and investing in the digital marketing? Let the lawyers be the lawyers, because of course, except for let's say Arizona primarily right now with the alternative business structures, okay, still lawyers are the owners of law firms. Yet money can come into law firms to let the lawyers practice law, similar to let the dentists drill the teeth, put in the implants, and do the sophisticated dental work that dentists can do, but with, and now let's call it out, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, with managed service organizations, MSOs, right? Then the MSO can be doing the non-law part of it legally, efficiently, profitably, okay, and let the lawyers ideally work with the right clients and get the best results, particularly in the plaintiff bar. So curious to see, because you mentioned about the strategic buyer, what about the PE buyer and the MSO type model? What are you seeing? What are you thinking?
Generally, those are strategic type buyers because they are looking to acquire more than one firm, usually so that management company can manage more than one entity. Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of that type of model coming into the market. I think there are three things that are kind of disrupting this industry right now. And it is, to take a step back and say, it's a little bit, I don't know, odd or funny to me that the lawyers are, for lack of a better term, behind the curve on this. The medical community has done it. The CPAs have done it. There are other people that have gone to these managed service type models. But again, because by and large, law firms have to be owned by lawyers, there's been some resistance in here. lawyers have not seen their law firm as a sellable asset until really the last 4 or 5 years. And that's when private equity came in, venture capital, and also combined with an aging population of lawyers saying, hey, maybe it's time for me to monetize what I have built. A lot of times before that, they were just, my dad would say, put the key in the door and walking away, and that was just it. But combined also with the Arizona ruling of non-lawyer ownership and the potential of that spreading. It hasn't spread like I think some people thought, but all of those things, there's three things there, triggered a lot of buzz and a lot of activity. I call it smoke. There's smoke in the industry. There is some fire, but there's a lot more smoke. I've been lucky enough to be involved in 4 transactions that have closed, but we worked on one transaction for 10 months that didn't close. And that one, I learned so much more of what was the valuation and what individual people are looking for, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a change here. The managed service organizations are becoming much more prevalent. They're out there. And they're fits for some firms looking to get, or some owners looking to get out. So, I'll say one other thing. There are managed service organizations too that will let you take a little bit of a ride. And what I mean by that is you can sell a percentage of all of your firm or a percentage of your firm, and also then acquire a percentage of the management company that as part of the deal that will allow you some upside potential in the longer run. So there's a lot of different ways to skin this acquisition or sale cat at the moment.
Well, great. Tim, thank you so much. And just to summarize, I think you're really spot on. I mean, as that buzz is only going to continue, and I agree with you, let's use that metaphor of the smoke, and there's going to be fire. There's just, you and I and others, we just see too much interest in this marketplace. There's going to be more transactions. And whether you're a senior attorney or you run what I call a startup law firm, the younger attorneys that are growing firms quickly by digitally marketing and involving lead gen companies and whatnot to generate clients, what Tim said is gold, right? That is, you have to be profitable. Okay, you have to have systems and processes. We have to be tracking those systems and processes. You don't just deserve to be sold for some kind of a multiple. There's math and science and hard work and effort behind it. And the founder, if you are a senior attorney and you found the firm and amazing, and we know these people, so many of us grew up with senior attorneys, PI attorneys now, they were on the back of our yellow pages. They've been front and center on our TV stations and on billboards. But to Tim's point, if the firm is still relying so heavily on an individual, on a founder, is that really going to generate the type of value as compared to the systems and processes, profitability that Tim talked about? And as Tim mentioned, and Tim, I'm glad to give you the props here, Vista Consulting team focuses on plaintiff contingency firms. So when you're looking for coaching, there's plenty of coaches out there, and I promote coaches. I work with a coach myself. If you are a plaintiff contingency firm, you should be consulting with, learning from a coaching consulting firm that focuses exclusively in this practice area. Tim, it's what you do. I really appreciate that you joined today. Could you share with us your email address and how people can get in touch with you?
Sure. And once again, thank you so much for having me. Our website is www.vistact.com. That's VISTACT.com. My email address is tmckey@vistact.com. And Jeremy, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Real pleasure. Thanks so much, Tim. All the best. Okay, so for today's Poock's Post. Today's Poock's Post is thoughts about law firm sales during the second half of the 2020s. So we're giving a lot of thought to that. Here we are entering into the second half of the 2020s, and we think of law firm sales, no matter what, however the sales of law firms will change over time, the least common denominator when it comes to law firm sales is clients, right? Every law firm needs clients. And when you're selling a law firm, the question is going to be where and how many and what type of clients that you have. So when we're thinking about law firm sales heading towards 2030 in the second half of the 2020s, we think first and foremost about where is business development today in the legal industry. And we are clearly here in the mid 2020s and what we call the 3.0 era for the legal industry, because that is the digital era for our industry. And when it comes to business development in the mid 2020s, there's really 6 feeders. We call them windmills, right? They're generating the energy source for law firms, and those 6 windmills for generating clients in the mid 2020s starts first and foremost with Uncle Google, right? We continue to say that Uncle Google is America's greatest referral source for lawyers, and it's America's greatest rainmaker for lawyers and law firms, because we as a society, we go to Google searching for anything and anything and everything. If I want to buy a new tennis racket, if I want a new pair of sneakers, if I want to go to a great restaurant, if I want to travel overseas, I am asking Google for information about fill in the blank, just like clients today are asking who is the best fill in the blank attorney near me for such and such a need. Secondly, in terms of that windmill generating business development is AI. And it's amazing how quickly that disruption has happened when it comes to AI. If we think about ChatGPT was only introduced in late November of 2022. And when we're filming this now, we are entering just about into the fourth quarter of 2025, and already tens of millions of Americans have downloaded. They use ChatGPT. They rely upon ChatGPT as a thought leader, as authority, and we know that we need to check it. Of course, we're not using it for our legal briefs, or at least we shouldn't just yet, right? But we are certainly relying upon ChatGPT and other forms of AI when we're asking for, hey, who can you recommend for this legal issue that I have? Who are the best attorneys to meet those needs? And then we're seeing how it is producing so quickly a number of law firms to consider. That level of authority will only continue to grow and develop business for those law firms that are benefiting by the AI authority that comes from the searches that we as a society will only continue to engage in with ChatGPT and other forms of AI. The third windmill when it comes to developing business in the mid 2020s is social media, right? We are all using different forms of social media, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, Threads. There will probably be more. And as clients are looking for lawyers, they're looking for social proof. They want to know who likes, who follows, who's on, who's a thought leader in these, in these different platforms, on these different platforms. And when clients see lawyers and law firms participating on those social media platforms that they're engaging in, gets the attention of clients, hence the business development. Of course, in terms of the fourth windmill is your website, right? Once you can get the attention of clients, that's coming from Google, AI, social media, right? Then potential clients coming to your website, they want to see on your website that you have hundreds, literally hundreds of Google reviews. When they see that, again, social proof. They don't need yesteryear's recommendation from a brother, a sister, a father, a financial planner, an accountant. When they go on your website, they want to see the Google reviews. They want to see what you've done, where you've done it, what accolades you have, what your clients say about you. How do you get that attention today? You're getting that attention by SEO rankings, Google AdWords. PPC is still alive and kicking because we need clients to come to your website. They come to your website, that generates business. The fifth windmill that generates business development is audio and video, right? Potential clients, they want to listen to your podcast. They want to hear you. They want to watch your videos. They want to see you and hear you. And then webinars that you lead. You're a thought leader, right? You should be out there and be letting people understand and know the great areas of law that you have mastered, that you know about. You are a thought leader. You lead a webinar on areas of your practice. And then finally, in terms of that business development in the mid 2020s, is still old school. Yes, lawyers still hand out business cards. But as a question to any lawyer who's watching this right now, when was the last time that you reordered 500 business cards? It's just not happening as much as it used to. Old school networking, yes, it happens. And when people make referrals, word of mouth referrals, they're gold, right? They are absolute gold. But in reality, in the mid 2020s, business development continues to grow digitally. So now let's look at law firm sales 1.0. So as we are thinking about law firm sales heading into the second part of the 2020s and heading towards 2030, let's think about where we've been. Since senior attorney match started in the 20 teens, okay, and going into the early part of the 2020s, we have seen for the most part what we call law firm sales 1.0. Law firm sales 1.0 is relatively simple. The value proposition is if I'm a selling attorney, I have a book of business, which consists of clients and referral sources. A buyer will pay the seller an earnout based upon the performance of the book of business over a negotiated number of years. That is, clients that continue to retain selling law firm that are attributable to, I'm sorry, clients that retain purchasing law firm that were clients in the named book of business of a seller. Buyer will pay a percentage of those collections over a negotiated period of time. As an example, 20% to 25%, maybe higher in certain practice areas on the collections from the book of business over, let's say, a 5, 7, maybe even sometimes 10-year period. That's law firm sales 1.0 is the earnout price. The primary value of law firm sales 1.0 is the book of business. Now let's look at how disruption, though, has entered into the legal industry, right? Digital marketing disruption is here. It's a fact. Clients post 2020, they search for their lawyers online. They search Google, they search AI, they search social media, they go onto websites. They are not even asking, as they did in prior years, for a word of mouth recommendation for who do you recommend. Instead, they are doing that digitally, just as we search for almost everything and anything today online. What does that mean for senior attorney-led firms in particular who grew their practices in the word of mouth era? They grew great books of business as rainmaker attorneys pre-Google. Well, if you are not being found because you're not engaging in multi-channel digital marketing, then the result of today's digital marketing disruption is that your book of business is not replenishing as much as it did in yesteryear. So let's look back now at where law firm sales 1.0 is heading in the second half of the 2020s. Where it's heading is that if you're relying on word of mouth and your goodwill reputation without significantly investing in multi-channel digital marketing to attract the attention of clients for your law firm, or if you're a solo lawyer, then your book of business is not going to replenish as much as it did during what we call the 1.0 word of mouth era. As a result, if your book of business does not replenish as much as it did in yesteryear, it's going to be worth less. And not worthless, worth less. And just to make the analogy, it's not as drastic as Uber, Amazon, and Netflix, right? Where that disruption, like literally put taxi cab medallion owners out of business, put Sears out of business, put Blockbuster out of business. It's not happening as fast in the legal industry. It's here, though. Digital disruption is here. It's only going to continue. And as a result, the value in law firm sales 1.0 will go down for those lawyers whose books of business aren't as valuable as they were at the beginning of the 2020s. So, in terms of an adage, let's think about what goes down here will go up. Because if the books of business of senior attorneys relying upon the word of mouth for generating business for their firms, if their books of business are going down, well, there still are thousands, tens of thousands, millions of clients who continue to need legal services. Who's getting that business? Who's getting that business are digitally savvy, growing law firms that are generating their clients digitally. And if you're generating clients digitally, then congratulations, we are entering into what we call law firm sales 2.0. And law firm sales 2.0, and this will only continue in the second half, or in the second half of the 2020s and heading towards 2030, is that we're going to continue to see in law firm sales values attributable to digital value and brand equity. That is, when a purchasing firm can study the records, the financial records of, and really the data analytics of a selling law firm that can show that clients don't just come in because of the goodwill of one or more Rainmaker attorneys. It comes because that is new clients come into the firm because the firm is converted to become a digital Rainmaker, right? It's the rain happens. The clients come not because of single attorneys, but because of the digital value, the brand equity of the law firm. Then not only will the buyers have the interest and the ability and the proof to pay upfront amounts as the consideration to a selling law firm. When I said ability to pay, means that banks will come in, and we're starting to see this. Banks will come in and will lend upon the sales of law firms based upon the value of those data analytics. So as we continue to think about where law firm sales are going in the second half of the 2020s, our eyes are on law firm sales 2.0, and that there will be sales of the book of business that will continue as an earnout, and there will be additional payments on digital value and brand equity for those firms that can reliably show that clients come to their firms, retain their firms because they can show digital value and brand equity. And that is episode 28 of the Ask the Law Firm Seller Show.